Ma'am, step out of the vehicle. Officer, I'm in uniform. I'm a sergeant in the U.S. Army. What's going on? I said step out. Now, don't make this harder than it has to be. He didn't see her badge. He only saw her skin. When Officer Kevin Dawson stopped Sergeant Evelyn Carter that night, it wasn't about a traffic violation. It was about power. A woman in uniform, humiliated on the side of the road, her voice calm, but her dignity slowly stripped away. But what he didn't know was who he had just picked a fight with. Sergeant Carter tried to de-escalate. He escalated. She stood her ground. He crossed the line. And when her family became his next target, Evelyn knew one thing. Silence was no longer an option. Can one woman bring a system built on fear and prejudice to its knees? Or will the same system that tried to silence her destroy everything she loves? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to stay updated on this amazing journey. Let us know where you are watching from and what time it is. Drop it in the comments section below. Sergeant Evelyn Carter was pulled over by Officer Kevin Dawson, a man Evelyn knew had a history of racial bias. License and registration, Dawson said, his voice sharp, like a knife cutting through the silence. Evelyn reached for her wallet, carefully pulling out her identification and registration. Despite her attempts to remain composed, her fingers felt clammy. As she handed them over, she spoke calmly and measuredly. Is there a problem, officer? Dawson took the papers, but didn't look at them. His eyes lingered on Evelyn's face, and for a moment, Evelyn could have sworn she saw a flicker of something dark in the officer's gaze, something more than suspicion. Step out of the vehicle, Dawson ordered, his tone growing more forceful. A surge of unease shot through Evelyn. She didn't understand why she was being asked to step out. No violation. No reason. Yet, here she was, being treated as though she were the criminal. She tried to reason with Dawson, keep calm, and de-escalate the situation. Can you tell me why I'm being asked to step out? Evelyn said, her voice steady but firm. There's no reason for this. Dawson's lips curled into a smirk, sending a chill down Evelyn's spine. Suspicious activity, Dawson replied, his voice dripping with condescension. Evelyn felt her pulse spike, her mind racing. She could feel the walls closing in around her. She had to act. But how? She knew that if she pushed back too hard, the situation could escalate quickly, and she could face far worse consequences than just a simple arrest. Her mind flashed to the many black women who had found themselves on the wrong end of an officer's power, their lives upended in an instant. With a deep breath, Evelyn pushed open the door, stepping out slowly, her boots hitting the pavement with a soft crunch. She stood tall, her posture rigid, keeping her hands in plain sight. Her heart was hammering in her chest, but she didn't let it show. Dawson circled her, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Evelyn could feel the officer's eyes on her, sizing her up, assessing her not as a person, but as a target. Where are you headed? Dawson asked, his voice now laced with a mocking tone. Home, Evelyn replied, her voice controlled, though her mind raced. I just finished a shift at the precinct. Dawson snorted, disbelief flickering across his face. A cop, huh? He said, as if it were the most absurd thing he'd ever heard. You don't look like one. Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she didn't let the insult show. I am a cop, she said simply, her voice unwavering. Dawson's expression darkened, his skepticism mounting as he looked Evelyn up and down. Well, that's convenient, he muttered, before stepping closer. Where's your badge? Your ID? Evelyn felt the rush of panic rising in her chest. She always carried her badge. It was part of the uniform, part of the routine. But today, of all days, she hadn't. She had left it in the locker at the precinct. She knew this would instantly be the opening Dawson needed to escalate things. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her wallet, but she could do nothing. I don't have my badge on me, Evelyn admitted, her voice steady, but her stomach churned. It's at the precinct. Dawson's eyes gleamed with triumph. He laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Of course. How convenient, he said, his voice dripping with disdain. He turned back to the patrol car and called for backup. Evelyn's mind raced. She could feel the trap closing in on her. No badge, no proof, nothing but her word against the officers. And just like that, everything changed. The calm, controlled atmosphere Evelyn had worked to maintain vanished as Dawson pulled out his radio, calling for backup. Minutes later, another patrol car arrived, lights flashing, and a second officer, Officer Grant, stepped out. His eyes scanned Evelyn, the contempt evident in his expression. Evelyn's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and calculations. She had to fight back. But how? The officers approached her with force, their hands resting on their holsters, their voices commanding, their intentions clear. Evelyn's calm began to crack, but she refused to back down. She stood firm, facing the officers, knowing anything could happen now. She had to make it out of this alive, but the odds were stacked against her. Without warning, Dawson shoved Evelyn toward the patrol car, slamming her into the vehicle with such force that her head rattled against the metal. Pain exploded in her skull, but Evelyn refused to cry out. Her body hurt, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. She knew she couldn't back down. Not now, not after everything. What was happening wasn't just about her. It was about every black woman who had ever been mistreated, every soul that the weight of racism had crushed. Evelyn fought, her body trembling to break free. But the officers were relentless. They twisted her arms behind her back, the cuffs biting into her skin. She tried to stay calm, to think, but all she could feel was the weight of their hatred pressing down on her. As the officers dragged her toward the patrol car, Evelyn knew this was just the beginning. She had no idea how far this fight would go, or how long she could keep her head above water. But one thing was clear. Dawson wasn't going to stop. She wouldn't let this be the end of her story. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, and as the door slammed shut behind Evelyn, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about something much bigger than that, something worth fighting for. As Sergeant Evelyn Carter walked into the dark, she sank onto a bench, hands clasped together tightly as she tried to steady her racing heart. Every interaction with her colleagues felt tainted by the past week's events. No one outright said it, but Evelyn could feel the stares, the uncomfortable glances, the whispers. She was being treated differently now. The entire system allowed them to behave the way they did. One morning, as Evelyn stood in front of her bathroom mirror, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her sister, Tina. "Evelyn, I've been watching the news. You okay? This is bigger than you think. People need to hear what happened." The message hit her like a wave. She was right. People needed to hear her side of the story. And if no one else would tell it, she must ensure the truth came out. She recorded a video, her hands shaking as she spoke into the camera. She recounted everything that had happened, from the moment Dawson had pulled her over to the degrading treatment she had received. She made sure to speak from her heart, to let the raw emotion of the moment come through in every word. As the video went live, Evelyn's heart raced. She knew that by sharing her story, she was making herself vulnerable. She was exposing herself to the world, to the people who might not understand, who might even accuse her of lying. But she was willing to take that risk. She had to. The response was immediate, and it hit Evelyn harder than she anticipated. Her video quickly gained traction. Shares, retweets, and messages of support flooded in. People were listening. They were paying attention. And then, the message that made her heart swell with a strange sense of hope appeared on her screen. "You're not alone. Keep fighting. We're with you." It was from someone she didn't know, but it was the message she needed to hear. It reminded her that her voice mattered, that her truth mattered. The flood of support was overwhelming. People who had never experienced what she had stood beside her, raising their voices in solidarity. It was a moment that changed everything for Evelyn. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Evelyn knew that. The real work was just beginning, and she wouldn't stop now. She couldn't. Her story, her pain, was part of a much larger conversation about racism, injustice, and change. And if she had to be the one to start that conversation, then so be it. She wouldn't back down. As Evelyn sat there, reading the messages of support, a thought crossed her mind. So, Evelyn Carter looked at the camera one last time, her eyes filled with determination. Please, press that like button to show your support. Share this. Let the world hear our stories, pain and fight. I'm not giving up, and I hope you won't either. Let's make sure our voices are heard. And with that, she posted the video, knowing that the fight for justice had just begun. But at least now, she wasn't fighting alone. Sergeant Evelyn Carter's heart pounded as Officer Kevin Dawson's words echoed in her ears. The officer's tone was filled with venom, a stark reminder of the racism that often lurked beneath the surface of their interactions. She had been stopped, not for any violation, but because of the color of her skin. Dawson's sneer was unmistakable as he threw cruel insults at Carter, ignoring her pleas for fairness. The humiliation burned deep, but what hurt even more was the sense of powerlessness. The system that was supposed to protect her was complicit in perpetuating the injustice. Despite the anger coursing through her, Carter refused to back down. Her instincts told her to fight for her dignity, for the rights that were being stripped away. She had served her country and dedicated her life to ensuring others' safety. But now, standing in front of Dawson, it felt as though her very humanity was being questioned. "You'll never be more than what they say you are," Dawson taunted, pressing further. It wasn't just an assault on Carter's pride, it was an attack on her identity, her very existence. Evelyn's family, watching helplessly from the sidelines, now became the target of Dawson's fury. With each threat the officer threw at them, a sickening sense of fear rose in Carter's chest. Her mind raced. What could she do? She was one woman, standing against an entire system that seemed determined to crush her. And yet, despite the mounting threats, something within her refused to falter. She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of history, of every injustice ever suffered, pressing on her shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every black person who had been silenced, belittled, and oppressed for too long. Carter had always believed in the promise of justice, the hope that right would eventually triumph over wrong. But as the officer's insults grew louder and her family was driven into hiding, Carter felt the crushing weight of reality. This system was broken. It wasn't going to change unless someone fought to change it. She wasn't going to let Dawson's cruelty define her, and she wasn't going to let her family be torn apart by fear. She had to be the one to stand up, to be the voice that could no longer be silenced. With a newfound resolve, Sergeant Carter knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be won with a single act of defiance. But it was a battle worth fighting, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been targeted for their skin color, their heritage, their identity. As the officer advanced with threats, Carter's voice finally broke through, steady and firm. "You won't break me, and you won't break my family." With those words, she decided not to back down, but to fight with everything she had left. As Carter pushed forward into the storm of racial injustice, she called on the strength of the ancestors who had fought and struggled before her. With each step, she moved closer to breaking the chains of oppression, knowing that no matter how hard the fight, she wouldn't stop until the truth was known, until change was inevitable. But she couldn't do it alone. You, the viewers, hold the power to support this fight for justice. Your voice matters. Share this story, comment below with your thoughts, and help spread the word that change is possible. Let's continue to push forward, one step at a time, supporting those like Sergeant Evelyn Carter, who are risking everything for a better tomorrow. Press the like button, leave a comment to encourage Carter's journey, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire action, justice, and hope. Together, we can make a difference. Sergeant Evelyn Carter's life had always been shaped by duty and honor. She had been a model officer, dedicated to serving her country and protecting those around her. But everything changed the day she found herself at the mercy of Officer Kevin Dawson. It started with a routine stop, one that should have been harmless. But the situation escalated into something more sinister in a matter of minutes. Evelyn quickly realized that Dawson wasn't simply pulling her over. He was targeting her. The officer's eyes were filled with disdain, as though the very presence of a black woman in uniform was an affront to his worldview. As the insults began to fly, Evelyn's heart raced. She was being held at gunpoint for no reason other than the color of her skin. What started as a routine traffic stop became a battle for her dignity. But what followed next was nothing short of unbelievable. Dawson didn't just stop at humiliating Evelyn. He began making threats, dragging her family into the situation, and stirring up a whirlwind of chaos. It was clear that Dawson was trying to provoke Evelyn, make her react, and give him a reason to arrest her. But Evelyn had been trained for this. She knew how to keep her composure and rise above. But the real mystery began when Evelyn chose. She wouldn't just take this insult lying down. She was going to fight, not just for herself, but for every person who had been wrongly judged, marginalized, and oppressed. The moment she chose to stand tall, something changed. A fire ignited within her, which had been smoldering for years, but had never been allowed to burn. Evelyn took the fight to places no one expected her to go. She wouldn't just fight Dawson. She would fight the system that allowed men like him to operate with impunity. In an unexpected twist, Evelyn launched an undercover investigation into Dawson's connections, using her skills to track down information that would expose the officer's misconduct. It was dangerous, audacious, and reckless, but Evelyn was willing to risk everything. With each piece of information she uncovered, the mystery deepened. Evelyn realized that Dawson's corruption wasn't isolated. It was part of a much bigger, more dangerous network with its claws deep in the community. The more she dug, the more shocking the revelations became. Dawson wasn't just a racist officer. He was part of a larger, more powerful web of systemic abuse. Evelyn knew that exposing the network would not only jeopardize her life, but also put the lives of her family and her career at risk. But she couldn't turn back now. Every step of the way, the stakes grew higher and the risks became more dangerous. Yet, Evelyn continued, uncovering secrets that no one wanted to confront. She had uncovered evidence that could bring down the corrupt officers and politicians behind the scenes, but time was running out. Dawson was on her tail, knowing the officer wouldn't rest until Evelyn was silenced. The tension built as Evelyn's investigation brought her closer to the truth, and the risk of getting caught became more real. One false move, and her life as she knew it would be over. But Evelyn wasn't afraid anymore. She had come too far to stop now. The power she felt wasn't just in the information she had uncovered. It was in the people who stood behind her, who believed in the fight for justice. As Evelyn confronted Dawson one final time, the truth came crashing down. Dawson was arrested, but the real battle had only just begun. Evelyn's quest to expose the truth had sparked something more significant. An entire movement had started to rise, with people rallying behind her, demanding accountability for the corrupt system. Evelyn had not only challenged one officer, She had brought an entire system to its knees. Now, Evelyn stands at the crossroads, knowing the battle isn't over. But she knows that change is possible, and that the fight for justice is worth every sacrifice. She's not just a woman fighting for herself anymore, she's a symbol of hope for others who've faced similar struggles. Evelyn's journey is just beginning, and the real question is, will you stand with her? The power of this story lies in the strength of the community that supports it. Leave a comment below to show your support for Evelyn's fight. Like and share this story to spread the word, and don't forget to subscribe so you can follow her incredible journey as it unfolds. Together we can make sure her message is heard loud and clear. Sergeant Evelyn Carter never imagined the day she would be forced to face the raw, ugly reality of racism while serving her country. As a proud black woman in the military, Evelyn always held her head high, believing that her service would speak for itself, that her dedication and commitment would erase any notions of racial bias. But everything changed that fateful day when she encountered Officer Kevin Dawson, whose heart was as dark as his badge was meant to protect. Evelyn had been stopped on a routine patrol, but the tension in the air was anything but routine. Officer Dawson's cold eyes locked onto Evelyn, as if he had already decided about who Evelyn was. His treatment wasn't based on Evelyn's actions, but rather the color of her skin. From the moment Dawson barked orders at her, Evelyn could feel the weight of racism pressing down on her. Her military uniform, years of service, and sacrifices meant nothing in that moment. She was reduced to nothing more than a black woman in the eyes of a man who saw her as inferior. But Evelyn wasn't one to cower. She tried to reason and explain herself, but every attempt was met with cruelty. Dawson's insults grew sharper, more personal. "You think you're something just because you wear that uniform?" he sneered. "You're just like the rest of them." Her fists clenched in anger and hurt. Evelyn refused to let Dawson break her. She knew she couldn't back down. But as the abuse continued, her mind raced. How could she expose this? How could she stand up when the entire system was against her? When the physical assault began, it was as if Evelyn's whole world turned into a blur of pain. Her uniform was stained with blood, and her body ached from the brutality. But it was the insult to her dignity that hurt the most. As Dawson's cruelty spiraled out of control, Evelyn's mind flashed back to her ancestors' struggles, the weight of history bearing down on her. But in that moment, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was bigger. This was for every person who had ever been judged for their skin color, for every person who had ever felt small in the face of systemic injustice. The real turning point came when Evelyn chose to fight back, not with violence, but with resilience. Knowing the risks, Evelyn made a life-changing decision. She would escape Dawson's hold. But it wouldn't be easy. Every move she made had to be calculated. Her escape from the officer's grip wasn't just about getting away from him physically. It was about breaking free from the chains of racial oppression that had held her back for so long. Evelyn put her training to use, using her wits, instincts, and every ounce of courage she had to make a daring escape. As she fled, Evelyn knew the odds were stacked against her. Her career could be over, her family's safety in jeopardy. But she couldn't stay silent anymore. She had to expose Dawson and the system that allowed men like him to act with impunity. Every step of her escape was fraught with danger, but Evelyn pressed on, driven by a fire she had never felt before. It wasn't just about her survival. It was about something far more significant. She was risking everything to bring the truth to light. And she did. Evelyn's courage led her to uncover the full extent of Dawson's corruption and expose the officers who had been complicit in his mistreatment. The consequences were swift and dramatic. Dawson was arrested, and the system that protected him began crumbling. Evelyn had not only escaped a dangerous situation, she had dismantled a corrupt network. But as she stood victorious, the weight of what she had accomplished still hung heavy on her heart. She had fought not only for her own dignity, but for the dignity of all those oppressed by the same system. The story of Evelyn Carter is one of resilience and triumph over adversity. It is a testament to the power of standing up for what is right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Evelyn risked everything to expose the truth, and in doing so, she sparked a movement. Her fight is far from over, but the strength she has shown inspires us all. Now, the question remains: will you stand with Evelyn? Like, comment, and share this story to support her and everyone facing the same struggles. Subscribe to the channel to follow this powerful journey and stay updated on how Evelyn fights for justice. Together, we can keep this fight alive. Evelyn Carter's journey had only just begun, and the consequences of her brave actions were starting to take their toll. Having exposed Officer Dawson's brutal and racist behavior, Evelyn thought that her fight was nearing its end, but the truth was far from it. What she didn't anticipate was the deep personal cost that came with standing up to the system. Her military career, once her pride and joy, was now under constant threat. The whispers of her insubordination echoed through every hallway, and the eyes of her fellow officers followed her with suspicion. She knew the risks when she chose to fight back, but it didn't make the loneliness and uncertainty any easier to bear. The weight of the situation was immense. Evelyn wasn't just fighting for her dignity anymore. She was fighting for the justice of all those crushed by the oppressive systems she had once unquestioningly trusted. The racial discrimination she faced wasn't a singular event. It was a symptom of a much larger problem. But no matter how many times she told herself that this was for the greater good, it didn't make the reality of the consequences any easier to bear. Her family, too, became a target. They had always supported her, stood by her, and celebrated every promotion, every honor, and every triumph. But now they were being forced to endure the public fallout of her decision. Evelyn's husband, Michael, faced subtle but dangerous threats from colleagues who once admired his wife. Their son, Jamal, had to witness his mother vilified in the media, her courage twisted into something dangerous and disruptive. No one was safe from the ripple effects of Evelyn's fight for justice. The weight of the situation crushed Evelyn's spirit, but she couldn't afford to let it break her. Every day, she woke up with the resolve to continue, but as the days went by, the challenges only grew steeper. Every encounter with a fellow officer was laced with tension. Even those who had once called her a friend now seemed distant, cold, unwilling to support her battle. Those who might have spoken out in her favor were silenced by fear of retaliation, and Evelyn understood that all too well. She was a pariah, an outcast, yet she could not stop. She had chosen to expose the truth, and now had to see it through. But the emotional toll was hard to ignore. Evelyn would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every confrontation, every betrayal, and every painful moment. Her body ached from the brutal altercations, and the memories of Dawson's cruel words haunted her. The fight had taken more than she had ever expected. She was in constant physical pain, but the emotional wounds cut even deeper. She was physically and mentally exhausted, yet there was no time to rest. She was fighting an invisible war where the enemy was systemic, ingrained, and determined to break her. Then came the public backlash. Evelyn had never imagined the degree of hatred and vilification that would come with her actions. Her family's lives were turned upside down. People she once trusted now avoided her. The community that had once been her safe space was now divided. Some saw her as a hero, others as a troublemaker. But what stung the most was the realization that those in power were doing everything they could to silence her. The military's efforts to ruin her reputation were unrelenting. False accusations, whispers of insubordination, and false reports about her conduct were all part of a concerted effort to break her. But Evelyn stood firm, refusing to let the smear campaign succeed. Through all the hardship, pain, and setbacks, Evelyn realized that her struggle wasn't just about her. It was about the countless others who had suffered in silence for years, generations even. And though her body was worn and her spirit tested, the fire within her burned brighter than ever. She knew that the path ahead was long and filled with obstacles, but she was no longer fighting for validation. She was fighting for change. Despite everything she faced, Evelyn never once wavered in her commitment. She knew she might lose everything, but if her fight could bring even the slightest change, it would all be worth it. And though the struggles seemed endless, Evelyn found strength in her community. Every letter of support, every message from people whose courage she had inspired, reminded her of the bigger picture. She wasn't alone, and the fight would never end as long as people were standing beside her. The emotional and physical toll Evelyn endured only deepened her resolve. She had given everything, and yet the journey was far from over. Her courage, resilience, and determination made her a symbol of strength for so many who had been silenced by injustice for far too long. Evelyn Carter's story was far from complete, but it was already a story of triumph and standing up, even when the world pushed you down. If Evelyn's story has touched you, if you feel inspired by her courage, like and comment to show your support. And don't forget to subscribe to continue following her powerful journey toward justice. Together, we can make a difference. Evelyn Carter's journey was reaching a boiling point. Each day, it seemed the world's weight grew heavier, yet she refused to buckle under its pressure. After exposing Officer Dawson's horrific acts of racial discrimination, Evelyn thought she had made a difference. But the reality of the situation was far more complex than she had imagined. The pushback against her was relentless. Everywhere she turned, there were walls designed to stop her. Her once promising career was now a battlefield. No one seemed willing to stand beside her, but Evelyn couldn't afford to stop. Her resolve was tested in ways she never anticipated, and the path ahead was filled with even more danger and uncertainty. Her personal life had spiraled out of control. Her husband, Michael, once a pillar of strength, now looked worried every time Evelyn came home. Their son, Jamal, still too young to understand the weight of it all, watched his mother be dragged through the mud in the media, branded as a troublemaker by those who had once called her a hero. They were all targets of the system she was trying to fight, and it tore at Evelyn's heart. The guilt gnawed at her every time she saw the toll her decisions had taken on her family. She had always promised them safety and security, but now she was putting them in danger, and the emotional toll was immense. It didn't matter how often she told them she was doing this for the greater good. Their suffering was undeniable. At the same time, the pressure from the military and the system that had once embraced her grew stronger. Officers who had once been her brothers and sisters in arms now eyed her suspiciously. Every day felt like a silent war, an invisible battle fought with whispers, glances, and social exclusion. Evelyn no longer knew whom to trust, and that sense of isolation weighed heavily on her. She had made the ultimate sacrifice for the truth, yet it felt like everyone she turned to had turned their backs on her. They whispered about her behind closed doors, trying to discredit and break her. They didn't realize that the more they wanted to silence her, the louder her fight became. Then came the fateful day when the situation escalated beyond words. Evelyn had always known that the path she was on would be filled with violence. She just didn't expect it to happen so soon. Officer Dawson, who had once been just an adversary in the story, became the embodiment of the power Evelyn was fighting against. The confrontation between the two reached its breaking point, and the results were explosive. Dawson tried to intimidate Evelyn once again, this time using his position of power to make Evelyn fear for her life. The fight went from heated words to brutal physical force. Evelyn's body bore the scars of the battle. Each bruise, each mark, a reminder that her fight wasn't over. She had to endure so much, but each painful moment only fueled her desire for change. The battle was never just about Evelyn. It was about every man and woman who had been oppressed, who had lived their lives in silence because they feared the consequences of speaking out. Evelyn's personal pain became a symbol for all those whose voices had been muted for far too long. It was hard, though. The emotional weight of it all often felt suffocating. Every moment felt like a decision, one that could lead to peace, or worse, to the destruction of everything Evelyn had worked for. Her body ached, her spirit was tested, but her resolve was unshakable. She knew she couldn't stop now, not when so many were watching, waiting for someone to stand up and demand change. Despite the physical and emotional toll, Evelyn found strength in the unexpected places. She found solace in the messages from strangers who supported her, from people who had experienced the same oppression and witnessed the same cruelty. They saw her not just as a soldier, but as a hero. The kind of hero who wasn't afraid to challenge the system designed to silence her. Evelyn's fight had become bigger than just her. It was the fight of an entire community, an entire nation fed up with living in fear of injustice. As her story unfolded, more people rallied to her cause. Her courage was becoming contagious, sparking a wave of support from people who had been too afraid to speak out themselves. But it wasn't enough. The road ahead was still long, and Evelyn still faced the overwhelming weight of a system designed to keep her down. Yet, as she stood there, battered but not broken, she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. If Evelyn's story has touched you, if her courage and determination have moved you, then show your support by liking and commenting to stand beside her as she continues her fight. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated on this powerful journey toward justice. Together, we can make a difference. Evelyn Carter's journey had only just begun, and the twists and turns ahead would push her to the limits of endurance and strength. After the explosive confrontation with Officer Kevin Dawson, the stakes were higher than ever, and the world seemed to close in around her. But Evelyn refused to back down. Each night, she lay awake, haunted by the implications of her actions, the lives that were impacted, the people who would either cheer her on or see her as a threat. It was no longer just about her. It was about everyone who had been silenced by injustice, everyone who had been forced to hide in the shadows of fear. But even Evelyn, with her unmatched determination, didn't expect what was coming next. A mysterious figure, someone from her past, reached out to her under the cover of darkness, a whisper in the night, a coded message. Meet me at the old warehouse, 2 a.m. There was no name, no explanation, just a sense of urgency in the message. Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. Could this be an ally? Or was it another trap? Another attempt by those in power to break her? Yet Evelyn knew she couldn't ignore it. She had no choice but to trust the unknown, just as she had trusted her own instincts through all these struggles. As she approached the abandoned warehouse that night, the air was thick with tension. The shadows danced in the dim light from a lone street lamp, and Evelyn's heartbeat was loud in her ears. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was she about to face another fight? Or would she find a way forward? The door creaked as she pushed it open, and there, standing in the shadows, was a figure Evelyn knew all too well. A former military ally, now a whistleblower inside the corrupt system she was fighting. The man's eyes were filled with a knowing sadness and hope. He had vital, explosive information that could turn the tide in Evelyn's favor. The conversation that followed would change everything. The whistleblower, a man named Marcus, revealed that the corruption Evelyn was up against was more profound than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just Officer Dawson. There was a whole network of corrupt officials, military figures, and law enforcement working in concert to suppress the truth, to bury anyone who dared to speak out. The whispers of this secretive, shadowy organization had reached Evelyn's ears before, but now she knew the scale of what she was facing. It was bigger than one officer, more significant than one city. It was an entire system, a web of deceit that had been carefully woven over decades. But what Marcus offered was more than just information. He offered a way in, a risky, dangerous plan that would involve infiltrating the highest echelons of this network. Evelyn would have to walk through a maze of lies and deceit, putting herself directly in the line of fire. But the reward, the chance to bring this system crashing down, was worth the risk. It was a path that would test every ounce of Evelyn's will, a journey into the heart of darkness itself. As the conversation wrapped up, Marcus handed Evelyn a flash drive, the key to unlocking the corruption buried deep within the system. But it came with a warning. There are eyes everywhere, Evelyn. You can't trust anyone, not even me. The words echoed in Evelyn's mind as she left the warehouse that night, clutching the drive in her pocket. It was the most dangerous thing she had ever held. Yet it was also the key to everything. The knowledge on that drive could expose the truth, but also cost her everything she had left. Evelyn's path now was unclear, a winding road full of uncertainty, but there was no turning back. The weight of the truth was on her shoulders, and with it, the responsibility to take down an entire corrupt system. The fear of the unknown was real, but Evelyn's resolve was even stronger. She couldn't and wouldn't let the shadows of this conspiracy bury the truth any longer. As her journey continues, Evelyn's every move will be more dangerous than the last. Her courage is being tested, and her actions will have consequences that no one can predict. If you've been following Evelyn's journey so far, if her courage has sparked something inside you, then it's time to take action. Like, comment, and encourage her as she faces these impossible odds. Subscribe to the channel for more of Evelyn's unbelievable adventure, and stand with her as she takes on the dark forces trying to silence her. Your support can make all the difference in this fight for justice. Evelyn Carter had faced unimaginable odds, and the battle for her dignity was far from over. From the moment she was stopped by Officer Kevin Dawson because of her skin color, Evelyn had known that her life would never be the same. The humiliation, the taunts, the constant feeling of being inferior simply because of the way she looked. It had all boiled over in that fateful moment when she was wrongfully detained and assaulted. But this was just the beginning. Evelyn's heart pounded with fear and anger as she realized that fighting back would come at a cost, and every step toward justice was one step closer to danger. For weeks, Evelyn lived in the shadow of that moment, haunted by the memory of the cruel racial profiling that had sparked it all. The media covered the story, the community rallied around her, but Evelyn wasn't sure if any of it would be enough. In a world where the system seemed stacked against her, where laws could be bent and manipulated to silence the truth, how could one woman stand against the tide of corruption? It was in the quietest moments, when she was alone, that the doubt began to creep in. Was she strong enough to fight back? Did her voice matter? Would she ever see justice, or would she be crushed under the weight of the system that had allowed her suffering to go on for so long? But something inside of her refused to give up. Every time she thought about the injustice and the world her children would inherit, Evelyn found a new resolve. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had suffered because of the color of their skin. Her fight was their fight. The constant surveillance and the threats to her family made it difficult for her to escape the oppression. But she was willing to risk everything to expose the truth. No longer would she allow Officer Dawson's actions to define her life. No longer would she let the systemic racism that had pervaded every aspect of her existence go unchallenged. And so, she began to take risks. Her first step was to gather evidence. Evelyn knew that to make a real difference, she needed more than just her voice. She needed proof that the system was broken and that Officer Dawson's actions were part of something larger. Late at night, she sat in her dimly lit apartment, reviewing footage, notes, and testimonies from others who had been victims of racial profiling. Every document she uncovered, every piece of information she found, weighed heavily on her soul. The more she learned, the more it became clear. This wasn't just one rogue officer, but a pattern of discrimination that had infected every level of the justice system. But the deeper Evelyn dug, the more dangerous her life became. She knew she was now a target, not just for Dawson, but everyone who wanted to protect the status quo. Threats started pouring in. Anonymous calls, disturbing letters, and even physical confrontations. Her family was scared, and so was she. Yet with each new threat, Evelyn's determination only grew stronger. She couldn't stop now. If she did, all the pain, all the injustice and suffering of the past generations would go unchallenged. So, she kept going. She reached out to lawyers, journalists, and activists, slowly building a coalition of people who believed in her cause. Together, they would shine a light on the rot hidden in the shadows. Finally, the day came when everything Evelyn had risked and fought for came crashing to the surface. The evidence she had gathered was enough to expose the entire network of corruption that had been protecting Officer Dawson and countless others like him. Evelyn's bravery and willingness to face the darkest parts of the system led to the fall of a powerful group that had silenced so many voices for far too long. It wasn't just a victory for her, it was a victory for everyone who had ever been discriminated against, oppressed, or forgotten. But even as the truth was revealed and the wheels of justice began to turn, Evelyn knew this was only the beginning. She couldn't do it alone if there were battles to fight. That's where you come in. Evelyn's journey, filled with risk, pain, and triumph, isn't just a story. It's a call to action. It's a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing, and it's a fight we all have a role in. Like, comment, and support Evelyn's story as she challenges the system, and subscribe to stay updated on her journey. Together, we can make sure her story is heard, and that her fight for justice continues to inspire those who need it most. Evelyn Carter had come a long way from that harrowing moment when Officer Kevin Dawson first targeted her because of the color of her skin. Every day since, she'd faced countless challenges, threats, intimidation, and relentless pressure from her adversaries and even the system she once trusted. But Evelyn had something most didn't: an unyielding will to fight back, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been wronged by a system that never seemed to care. With each passing day, she could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on her, but she refused to be broken. It wasn't just her fight anymore, it was everyone's. After gathering all the evidence, after risking everything to expose the truth, Evelyn now found herself standing at the precipice of something far more significant than she could have imagined. The system that had allowed Officer Dawson's actions to thrive was beginning to crack. But the stakes had never been higher. The threats against her escalated as she dug deeper, and soon she realized just how dangerous this fight would become. Her family, once sheltered from the storm, was now in the crossfire. Late-night phone calls, anonymous letters, and even shadowy figures lurking outside her home became an all-too-real part of her daily life. Evelyn had no illusions about the cost of her crusade for justice. She knew the risks all too well, But there was no turning back now. Not when everything she had worked for, everything her community had suffered through, was on the line. As the pressure mounted, Evelyn's resolve hardened. She was determined not to let fear dictate her actions. Each time she faced the powerful forces that sought to silence her, she dug deep, summoning the strength to press forward. She began to document every encounter, every piece of evidence, knowing that the more she uncovered, the harder it would be for the corrupt system to cover it up. It wasn't about confronting Officer Dawson anymore, but about exposing the rot that had festered far too long. But with every step toward the truth, the danger grew. Evelyn knew the deeper she got, the more relentless her enemies would become. Yet, she refused to back down. One evening, as she reviewed footage and prepared a report, her apartment door was kicked open. She barely had time to react before she was grabbed, dragged across the floor, and thrown against the wall. For a moment, she thought this might be the end, but Evelyn wasn't going to let her story end like that. With every ounce of strength, she fought back. It was a brutal struggle, but she managed to break free, scrambling out the door, breathless and battered. The adrenaline surged through her veins, but the pain, the exhaustion, and the fear were still there. Yet, despite it all, Evelyn knew she couldn't stop now. She had come too far. As she fled, she thought of her family, of the fear in their eyes when they realized the fight had come to their doorstep. But Evelyn also knew that if she didn't keep going, if she didn't push back against the injustice, then their sacrifices, their struggles, would mean nothing. She had to keep moving forward, and now, more than ever, she needed the support of the people who believed in her, who believed in justice. As she continued to expose the truth, the story began to spread. People rallied to her side, offering their support, voices, and resources. Evelyn wasn't alone in this fight anymore. She had become the symbol of resistance, of a people standing against the oppressive system that had held them down for so long. Now, Evelyn stands at the crossroads of history. She has risked everything, her family, safety, peace of mind, for the chance to make a difference. And as her story unfolds, it's clear that the battle is far from over. But with every piece of evidence and voice that joins the fight, Evelyn's story grows louder, and justice becomes a little closer. This is where you come in. Evelyn's story isn't just her own. It's a story for all of us. By supporting her, liking, commenting, and subscribing, you're part of the movement, not just following her journey. You're helping amplify the message that justice can't be silenced, that corruption can be exposed, and that change is possible. So, hit that like button to show your support. Leave a comment to let Evelyn know you stand with her, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on her journey. We can help Evelyn continue this fight for justice, truth, and a better tomorrow. Evelyn Carter's journey had become something of a legend. What began as a simple desire to fight back against the injustice she had faced, being targeted because of her skin color, had grown into an intense, unpredictable whirlwind of mystery, danger, and defiance. She hadn't just been fighting against one man, Officer Kevin Dawson. She was fighting against a system that had repeatedly failed her and countless others. The deeper she dug, the more she uncovered. A vast conspiracy of corruption, lies, and manipulation stretching far beyond what she imagined. It all started with a phone call, one Evelyn almost didn't take. A mysterious voice, disguised and cryptic, warned her that the corruption she was battling went all the way to the top. At first, Evelyn dismissed it as paranoia, until strange things started happening. Documents began appearing in her inbox, files she never requested but couldn't ignore. The contents were chilling, recordings of conversations between high-ranking officials discussing her case, including officers who had been involved in her wrongful detention. As the puzzle pieces began to fall into place, Evelyn realized this was far more than just personal retribution. Her case was a small part of a larger, far-reaching web meant to protect the system that oppressed her. One night, while reviewing one of these mysterious files, Evelyn heard a knock on her door. She froze, heart racing. Thinking quickly, she grabbed the file and slipped it under her couch cushion as the door creaked open. Standing in the doorway was a tall, dark-haired stranger wearing a long coat. The man had a cryptic smile, and before Evelyn could react, he slid a small, folded note into her hand. "You're not alone, but be careful," the man whispered before disappearing into the night. Evelyn's heart pounded as she unfolded the note. "They know everything. You're being watched." With this revelation, Evelyn's world started to spin out of control. Someone was watching her, not just anyone, people with enough power to silence her for good. Her every move felt like it was under a microscope. Despite the fear, Evelyn had never been more determined. She knew the risk was enormous, but there was no turning back. The more she uncovered, the more she realized the depths of the conspiracy. She had already risked everything, her career, her family's safety. So why stop now? Her enemies were ruthless, but she no longer fought in the shadows. Evelyn was becoming the person they feared most, a threat to the system. Evelyn's journey was fraught with high-stakes moments. From a secret meeting with a whistleblower who had been too scared to come forward, to a daring escape from a hotel room when agents came knocking, Evelyn was living on the edge. In one tense moment, she narrowly avoided being captured by a group of officers tracking her every move. With ingenuity and sheer willpower, Evelyn managed to slip through their fingers, disappearing into the crowded streets, but not without leaving behind a clue that would ultimately turn the tide in her favor. The closer Evelyn got to the truth, the more desperate her opponents became. But she was relentless. She kept pushing forward, each discovery feeding her resolve. The final breakthrough came when she hacked into a hidden server containing evidence of the highest-ranking officers orchestrating a massive cover-up. The truth was finally in her hands, and Evelyn had just one choice: expose it to the world. As she prepared to release the damning evidence, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Who could she trust now? The lines between friend and foe had blurred, and she knew she couldn't do this alone. It was time to rally the people, to make sure the truth couldn't be silenced. But the stakes were higher than ever before. One wrong move, and everything she had fought for would be lost. Evelyn's fight wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had been oppressed, everyone who had been silenced, everyone who had been ignored. It was about breaking the chains of an unjust system and forcing change, no matter the cost. This was where you, the viewer, come in. Evelyn's story isn't just one person's fight. It's a movement, and you are a part of it. Like, comment, and subscribe to show your support. The more voices we have, the stronger the message becomes. Together, we can make sure Evelyn's story is heard, because when one person stands up, they can change everything. Evelyn Carter's battle had reached its climax. After months of relentless pursuit, heart-stopping escapes, and relentless pressure from the corrupt officers and the system that sought to silence her, Evelyn finally did it. The evidence was in her hands, the truth laid bare for the world to see. The system that had long oppressed her and so many others was crumbling, and the authorities who had wronged her were finally being held accountable. It wasn't just a victory for Evelyn. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been silenced, targeted, or oppressed. As the story unfolded, the world took notice. News outlets, social media platforms, and advocacy groups were all buzzing with the shocking revelations Evelyn had uncovered. Her bravery had sparked a fire of change that would ripple through the justice system for years to come. It was more than just one person's fight. It had become a movement, Evelyn's courage had inspired countless others to speak up, to demand accountability, and to fight for justice, no matter the cost. Through all the pain and hardship, Evelyn had never wavered in her commitment to doing what was right. The story of her fight against racial discrimination was more than just an emotional journey. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Evelyn had shown the world that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, standing up for what's right can lead to real change. Her story became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that hope and determination can lead to triumph, even in the darkest moments. But the journey didn't end with just the exposure of corruption. Evelyn's victory was not just about exposing the lies, but about creating a ripple effect, ensuring that future generations wouldn't have to fight the same battles. Evelyn knew the fight was far from over. Her victory was a step forward, but much was still to be done. She clarified that this began a more significant movement toward justice, equality, and accountability. She wanted to ensure her story wasn't just a flash in the pan, that it would be remembered and built upon. She urged everyone following her journey to continue the fight, to stand up for those whose voices were still unheard. In real life, Evelyn's story teaches us an invaluable lesson. No matter how impossible a situation may seem, we all have the power to challenge injustice. It's easy to feel small in the face of a robust system, but one person can make a difference. Evelyn's strength and courage remind us that standing up for what's right, even when the world is against you, can bring about change. Never be afraid to speak the truth, stand tall, and fight for your beliefs. Your actions can inspire others to do the same. So, as we reach the end of this incredible journey, let's take a moment to reflect on the lessons we've learned from Evelyn. If we can take anything from her courage, let it be this: never back down in the face of adversity, and never underestimate the power of one individual to make a difference. You have the power to change the world, just like Evelyn did. If this powerful journey has inspired you, please take a moment to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Your support encourages the fight for justice and accountability. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive new stories like this one. Together, we can continue to spread the message of hope, resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right.